Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome to today's webcast entitled ServicePoint 365 SharePoint Online Made Easy. We are going to be recording this webcast and distributing to people after this session. Also, a couple other admin. We have muted all the lines. So right now, nobody, just in the interest of background noise, will be able to ask verbal questions. But we do invite you to submit questions throughout the webcast via the chat window. So you should see a little chat icon there in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And feel free to submit questions along the way, and we'll take a moment and answer questions as they come up. So I'm your host, David Husonica. I'll be taking you through this discussion today, and it's all about strategies on how to make SharePoint Online adoption even better for your company or your customers. If you are familiar with Office 365, you're familiar with that. It's really a bundle of products. And this slide here depicts the fact that, when you look at the different major components of Office 365, the desktop applications, email, Skype for Business, SharePoint Online are kind of the major components of it. A couple of these are adopted readily and go in very easily. And then some others are a little bit more of a challenge. And so what we're going to focus on today is solving the issue of the SharePoint Online quadrant being red, meaning that adoption ends up being a lot lower than what Microsoft and we would hope for businesses. The good news about SharePoint is it can do so many things, and it can provide a great deal of business value to a company. The challenge with SharePoint is that it can do a lot of things, and in order to have it do these things, many times you need to know something about SharePoint, and quite frankly, just a lot of organizations just don't have the skills to be able to go do much with it. So, and it ends up sitting there and not adopted to the level that we would all like. So that's really the business issue that we're going to try to help you solve today, is show you some strategies around increasing the adoption of SharePoint Online. If you think about what it really takes to have a successful SharePoint deployment, it's really a couple key ingredients, and we're going to cover all of these aspects today. And starting with the top of the screen, I like to use this image to really kind of drive home, what the key ingredients are. And beginning with, you need a structure in order to have a successful SharePoint Online deployment. And in the structure in the SharePoint Online world means you need to have the ability to you need to have intuitive navigation. You need to have areas defined for different purposes so that users can easily find their content. Make sure that you're able to secure different areas of the structure. So when we talk about our discussion today, the structure that we're going to talk about is really ServicePoint 365. That's the application that we're going to take you through a little deeper to show you how this can be the overall structure, or in this case, this can be the house, which has rooms in it already pre-built, has doorways, has entrances to it, has the way that you move around the house already predefined. And so that is a critical component to helping your customers be successful with SharePoint, is making sure that they have a structure. And if without something to aid them, that a company would have to go in and try to build the structure on their own. And that's again where just the lack of SharePoint skills gets involved, where many of them just don't know how to do that. So we're going to show you how to take advantage of a ready-made environment that's already pre-built. So using the same analogy, I mean, if you have a house and you're going to live in the house, you're also going to need to, of course, have all your stuff in the house. And when you look in the bottom left-hand corner here, we're going to talk about some solutions of how you can actually migrate easily your content into the structure, or in this case, migrate your furniture into the house. And there's different strategies about how you can do this, and we'll cover, from some very simple methods to things that are, other tool methods that can handle more complex migrations. And then finally, if you have all your furniture in the house and you're living in it, you're probably going to want to protect that and have a security system and the ability to respond in the event that something happens, some type of security breach or somebody breaks in. So we're going to also focus on talking about a couple options for how you can protect the content in the house or within SharePoint Online in the event something bad happens. So these three items will be really the gist of what our conversation is going to be about today. And again, as I go through this, I'll pause periodically, take a look in the conversation window. Please feel free to submit your questions that way if you'd like. So let's start with the structure. So what have we done in order to improve the overall layout and design of just kind of basic SharePoint Online out of the box? Well, we've created an application called ServicePoint365, and this application sits on top of SharePoint Online, and it does a number of things to it to improve the usability of base SharePoint Online. And the things that it does is, first of all, it provides an intuitive user interface. So there's an overall menuing navigation system that's pre-built and ready to go, and it helps answer the questions. A lot of people who are using SharePoint, a common feedback is, well, I know we got content out there, but I have a really hard time finding it, or I'm not sure where it is. And so this intuitive user interface will help resolve that to where it'll be very obvious to companies or to people as to where their content is. It also is pre-configured, so we've thought through a number of different aspects of what a business would naturally want to use something like SharePoint to be able to manage, the types of documents, the types of information, and we've pre-configured the environment so that it's ready to go out of the box around a number of different content areas, which we'll explore a little bit further here in a minute. So that pre-configuration also helps ensure that this goes in very quickly. So the ability to get an environment up and running, literally, within 30 minutes, you could actually have an environment installed, up and running, ready for your content. And as compared to if you're going to try to go build out something custom, that could take days, weeks, or even months in order to have a functioning SharePoint environment. So we've really streamlined the process to get deployed so that you can get up and running quickly. And then the final thing is we've done all this in a manner that really requires minimal to no SharePoint skills, which has been one of the issues with adoption, is that people just don't have the skills. And so we've eliminated the majority of that so that you can both implement it as well as use it without requiring SharePoint skills. So let's take a look at what that structure looks like, or what that house looks like. So we've again, we thought through different functional areas of businesses and came up with an overall information architecture and structure that we feel addresses many of the common business needs that people would have for something like SharePoint. And what we've done is we've organized the content areas into what we call centers. And that's just our terminology, and we'll talk about how you can have these the wording and the naming convention reflect what your client's needs are. But the areas that are already pre-built, ready to go out of the box are pretty broad. So we have an area set up for company intranet, which is normally is what you would use something like Company Center for. And this is where you can have each department can have their own unique area or workspace is what we call them. You can have common company calendars and common documents that everybody can access. And so that center, the company center, is really aligned towards providing the company intranet type of needs. And then moving across the top here, we also have an area set up for managing client information. So this is the client center is where you can keep track of your client or prospective clients, information about them, as well as the ability to store documents related to an individual client or prospective client, and then even share that if you wanted to with the client. We have a center set up for project information. So if you're a project or services-based business to where you're doing either internal projects or external projects, this is where you can actually manage all the different projects. Each project can have its own pertinent information, such as project type and status and dates and project managers, as well as the ability to easily generate a workspace for a project, which is where all the documents and deliverables would be stored and managed, and other things such as calendar and task lists. Moving down to the second row, we also have a center set up for managing sales opportunities. So this is where if you had a new proposal, a new bid, a new sales opportunity, where you can create a record about that opportunity, including who it's for and when it might close and the value, and then to be able to generate a workspace for that opportunity, which is where all the documents, the bid documents and the estimates and RFP responses and all that can be managed and collaborated on by the team. And then we've tied it back to clients, so it's tied back to the clients that you find in Client Center, as well as we've also tied it back to where if you win that opportunity, you can automatically generate a project in Project Center that copies over the information from the opportunity. So the ability to automate that whole winning a bid or proposal and turning it into a project, and then having the site for the project team to be able to work on. A couple other centers here related to projects and proposals is the Staffing Center and Resource Center, and this is where you can manage your resources, both information about the resources, which is their profiles or skills, their resumes, CVs, and then a Staffing Center is where you can actually go in and enter a staffing request. So let's say you had a project manager working in the field that had a request. They needed a SharePoint or an Office 365 engineer for a particular engagement. They could put that request in the Staffing Center, and then whoever's responsible for managing and filling those requests can go and do so. And then a couple other centers here real quickly, and then we'll get into some details behind it. We have a center set up for managing methodologies and processes, so if there's template documents that go with that, if you have a number of solutions that you work with and you need to have a centralized place to store the solution guides and maybe training materials and specifications, we've got an area all set up for that. We have a general knowledge repository, which is great for anywhere from best practices to training materials to safety related information, which is obviously very concerning for some industries. So the ability to manage that and share that centrally. And then dropping down to the final line here, we have a center set up for managing partner relationships. So if you have a contractor or a sub or a third party that you need to collaborate with, you can manage information about that person, that third party, and then also create a workspace for them so that you can put documents in there for them to be able to access and download and upload so you can improve the collaboration. And then finally, a support center, which is about tracking and managing issues. So the ability to track an issue, assign an issue to somebody, status an issue, complete a resolution, and keep the notes related to it. So out of the box, you get all 11 of these centers under a single product SKU, and it gives you a very broad functionality, but you also have the ability to manipulate this. So you might have cases where somebody doesn't need, all 11 of these areas. Well, we made it very easy to go in and change, turn things on and off, and rename things. And that's done through a simple configuration screen. No SharePoint skills required. So this is an example of the configuration screen that manages the highest level set of configuration. If you look down here, it shows here's all the different centers that are shipped with the application. And if you decide that you don't need to have a center turned on right now, all you do is you go in and you untick the box next to in the column here that says display, and if you uncheck it, then it immediately removes it from the menuing. So you have the ability to start very streamlined. Maybe you only need to use a couple centers to begin with, but as the use of SharePoint grows, then maybe you turn on other centers. You can also rename or repurpose any of these centers. So here where it says Sales Center, maybe we actually going to just use it for our grants or proposals. So I can go in and literally just type over the name of that center in that third column, which says display name, and call it whatever I want. And so I have the ability to not only turn them on and off, but also to repurpose centers for different needs. And so this type of flexibility, again, requires no SharePoint skills. And basically, if you have access to the screen, you can go in, turn them off, rename them, and the impact is immediate. So let's take a look at a couple of these centers and drill into them a bit further, so you can see, what a typical center may look like underneath the covers. So if I move back to the main menu, and let's maybe start with the company center. And by the way, the interface here, it's designed in a fashion that it understands the device you're on. So if you're on a PC, if you're on a laptop, if you're on a tablet, even down to the phone, it will resize the user interface. So it's a responsive design, so you can use it on the different devices. But let's say I want to go in and maybe take a closer look at Company Center. All I do is tap the screen, and it takes me into Company Center. And you can see that the menu navigation is now down the left, so I can easily jump from center to center, no matter where I am. And also, it lays down a breadcrumb here above that menu, so it shows me, where I am, and I can use that to navigate as well. But most importantly is what do I have in Company Center. So the first section here shows me here's all of my different departments, and so you can have as many different departments as you want. So in this case, we're showing accounting department, the finance, HR, IT, and it shows me a little bit of information about the department, such as who's the primary contact and the phone numbers, and you can control what these columns are as far as what's the most important information related to it. But if you look next to the accounting department, right next to it, there's this column that says Link to Workspace. So what we have done throughout the application is given you the ability to create unique workspaces for a variety of purposes. In this case, we're going to look at a workspace that's been generated for a department, but the same idea holds true in all the other centers. So, and we'll go through a project example, but any center has this ability to create a unique workspace. And what you can think of a workspace, it's a dedicated site for that purpose. And it's a dedicated site that has not just documents on it, but maybe other things such as calendar and tasks and so forth. And in lieu of this application, if you're going to go create unique sites for all these different areas of your business, somebody, and many times it's an IT type of person that would have to go in there and create maybe a team site or some other type of site, and then figure out how to string them all together into navigation and link them up. And so we've taken care of all that for you. It's a simple menu option to click on an area and say I want to generate a workspace for it, and and within 10 seconds, 20 seconds, you have a workspace. So let's take a look at what a workspace might look like. All I do is click on Link to Workspace, and it opens up the workspace for the accounting department. And in that workspace, in the Company Center has a template that it uses, which is each center has its own kind of template, which is has slightly different characteristics to it depending on which center you're in. But in the Company Center, if I generate a workspace for a department, you can see the first section here is there's an area for announcements for that department. And if I look, the next section is where all the documents related to that particular department can be stored, so that the accounting team has a unique place for their documents. And let's pause and talk a little bit about security, because security wraps around this entire environment to where you can secure down at any level, whether it's accessing the application as a whole, or a particular center, or in this case, maybe a particular department. You can control who has access to that, and so that only people who are allowed to have access can get in and look at the documents and work with things. So getting back to my workspace, so the first section was announcement area. I also have the documents area, and of course you can do things with these documents. Not only I can click on documents, or in this case I'm seeing a couple folders, so you can have folders and subfolders, or I can open up a document directly. I can drag and drop documents from my file explorer or my server into this area. I can synchronize documents down locally. So if I need to get on a plane, travel somewhere, I can have my documents locally on my device, make changes there, and then the next time I'm connected, it will automatically synchronize those documents back up into SharePoint Online or ServicePoint. There's a little menu options next to documents here where I can click on 3 dots next to a document, and I can share that individual document if I wanted to with somebody, not only internally, but let's say you had a third-party person that you needed to share a particular document with. As long as the company allows you to do that, you could click on that and say, I want to share it with David Husonica at Outlook.com, and it would send to that email an email with a link where they can click on it and automatically open up the document to either view or edit, depending on what kind of rights you give them. So the ability to easily collaborate with other people is built into it. So continuing on with the workspace for accounting, if I scroll down, I also see now there's a calendar here for the accounting team. So this would be things for like keeping up with major milestones, maybe tax filing dates, things that the accounting team needs to keep up with. And you can synchronize this calendar back to your Outlook if you so choose, so that you can once you start that synchronization, you could then make updates to the calendar here within the SharePoint Online ServicePoint environment, or you can make it on in Outlook and have it synchronized back and forth. So it's two-way synchronization. And then there's other pieces of information. If I kept on scrolling down, you'd see there was another area for like important links for the accounting team. And even further down, there's things like there's a task list. So if I have accounting tasks and making assignments to individuals in the accounting team, you can keep up with tasks and completions. So this is an example of a workspace. And again, we're going to look at some other examples of workspaces. They'll be slightly different depending on which center I'm in, but the idea is having a site which is provisioned, that has on it pertinent information for that purpose, in this case the accounting department, and so that it's a centralized place for people to be able to access and go to and do their work. So that is the accounting area. So we had one question come in. It says, can sync be controlled by user per location, library, or folder in the library? So there is the ability to turn on and off synchronization, but I think right now that The ability to allow people to synchronize, I think, is controlled at the SharePoint tenant level. Well, we can certainly get back to you if I'm wrong with that, and we'll find out if there's a different answer than that. But thank you for your question, and once again, please feel free to ask questions along the way. So let's go back to the main menu here, and let's take a look at some other centers. So let's say you're your customer is in a project-based business, so maybe they're a services company or a consulting company or a construction company, and they have projects that they are managing information about. Project Center is really intended to be able to help them with that particular part of their process. So if I just click on Project Center, it's going to take me into the Project Center. You can see now I'm in that particular center, and what it shows me is all the different projects that we have currently going on, and it shows me information about each project. So in this case, it's showing me, what's the name of the client, the name of the project, things like what type of project it is, what where geography, where it's located, who's the project manager. So it shows me master record information about projects, so that I can use this to not just store the documents, but actually also keep up with things like what are all the projects that we have going on that are in process. So any of these column headings I can easily sort, sequence, and filter, and limit my display here just based on what I select. So it gives you the ability to do very quick reporting off of kind of what's out there or what's going on, or maybe I want to see all the projects that certain person's a project manager, or that are certain types of projects, and you can stack those filters. These column headings that we're showing are just examples of many, many fields that come with the application already that you can use and include in these displays. So we've just included these 6 or 7 fields in this example, but let's say you don't really care about one of these columns, and maybe there's some other information that you'd like to display instead. You can reach back and pull forward other fields as an alternative and replace those columns. You can also add your own fields. So the application out of the box comes with a whole bunch of information already set up, already fields created, values for those fields, but you can very easily go in and customize the existing fields. So maybe it's an example, maybe it's a drop-down list that shows project types, and we ship a certain set of default values, but you can go in and change those values to be yours. But you can also add completely new fields and then use them throughout the application. And again, that's all just inherent in this environment. So, so keeping up with the master information, be able to sort, sequence, filter. You can think about, we're not going to go into it in detail, but the Sales Center. If you're using this, as a lot of people do, using it for a simple CRM application, you can see, imagine that similar things there where I've got all my sales opportunities, and I can sort, sequence, filter on all opportunities that are a certain status, or I can roll up dollar amounts and get a very quick pipeline reporting. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to do, that simple CRM type of application as well. But let's take a look at one more workspace before we move on, and we're going to use this project example. So if you have a project, great that I've got information about it, but once again, I'm probably going to have some documents. So, and that's where the workspace comes into play. So if I click on Link to Workspace, it's going to show me now for that particular project. In this case, I'm looking at ServicePoint365 implementation. It's going to show me information about that project. And so this is the workspace that is associated with just that one project. So beginning with some summary information. So this is, and you can control what fields show up here. So we're showing just some examples of fields, but again, if you have a team working on this project, what's some of the key information, metadata type of information that you'd want to display. This next section is where all my project documents and project deliverables would be stored. So and again, this is where the project team can go access those documents, can edit the documents, can synchronize the documents locally, can share documents externally. So let's say I'm working on this project and I've got a document I need to share out with a third party somewhere. I can simply click next to the document, click share, and send that third party a link so that they can view it or edit it very easily. If I scroll down again on the project workspace, some other sections on the template. Here's my project calendar, which is great for things like major milestones related to that particular project. If I scroll down a little bit more, I've got an area where I can keep track of things like who are the key contacts related to a particular project. This might be either internal contacts or external contacts. I've got task list and issues log that I can keep, and again, these are related to this one project. And so the purpose of the workspace is to have all the information about this project centrally located in one spot. So I've got information, metadata, I've got documents, I've got calendars, I got tasks, I got contacts, and some other connection points into Outlook that you can enjoy is things like task lists can be synchronized back to Outlook into the task list there. Contacts can be synchronized. So the ability to leverage the rest of the Office 365 suite with this environment is baked into it. This just shows you again the task lists and some other things related to that particular project workspace. The templates for each workspace, also you can control what shows up. And in that case, we were looking at a project workspace. So this shows you a settings page related to that, and where you can adjust what you want to actually be created on a project workspace. You can see right now, this particular list, I've got documents, calendar, all of those things are checked, meaning they're turned on. And like you saw with us turning on and off centers, you can do the same thing for any of these workspace layouts and say, well, in our case, maybe all we need is a document library and a calendar. We don't really need the other things, so I can just literally uncheck them. And whenever you create the next project workspace is created, it will be whatever is turned on there. So you can take this template or this app and very simply make some adjustments, and none of this requires any deep SharePoint skills. So that's a quick step through of the product, and certainly there's many more centers, and we could spend much more time drilling into the other centers, and be happy to do so as a follow-up meeting. But let's kind of move on to a couple of the other topics that we said that we were going to address, and beyond the application, really what is the value statement for customers that would be using this application as their structure for SharePoint is really being able to get up and running very quickly, and also very inexpensively. So you think about if you're going to hire in or contract a seasoned SharePoint developer to come in and build out a custom environment, that could be days, weeks, months of effort, and I can tell you those resources are not cheap. So it can be very expensive, and there are needs to do custom. So we're not saying that this is a one-size-fits-all, but you are able to also customize this environment. So if you did have some unique things, such as maybe custom workflows that you needed to build, or integration with other line of business applications, all that can still be extended. So we haven't eliminated or reduced the ability to extend this environment and do customizations on top of it. The ability, where we've increased the adoption for users. If you looked at how easy this is to use and navigate as compared to just SharePoint, blank screen, sheet of paper, this drives much greater adoption. And then, of course, do all this without requiring deep SharePoint skills. We have a common question is that comes up is how are updates taken care of? This is a provider-hosted application, so it gets installed into the client's Office 365 tenancy and into their SharePoint Online environment. But on the back end, we actually have a code base that's running in Azure that gives us an architecture. So not only does this come into play whenever it's initially installed, but if there's any updates or enhancements or new capabilities that's added, we can automatically push those out to all client tenancies. So we have a deployment architecture that's set up for that. So tools and resources related to it. So there's a whole bunch of tools that are out there for either resellers or end customers. There's a full solution guide. There's YouTube video channels. We can help with demonstrating the solution. So if you want to take a look at a live demo, we can work with you through your reseller, or we can work with the reseller directly. We can also help provide implementation assistance. So everything you need in order to get through your first implementation or deployment. Which getting into how this is actually deployed, which was one of the topics, is we do have a methodology, which is like any methodologies, it's intended to be kind of the overall roadmap that some clients follow or some resellers follow exactly, and then some kind of take their own path. But the key stages or phases of implementation is, first of all, of course, the installation of the code, which takes under 30 minutes to do, and you have a functioning environment. What we then recommend is that that you do a facilitated workshop, and this is where we go through a number of topics. And those topics go through a deeper orientation, talk about the different centers, and decide which ones make sense to use for a particular client environment. And it's a workshop, meaning that not only are we talking about it, we're actually doing real work, meaning we bring up the environment, we turn off centers that we're not going to be using. We do things like talk about what you want the default views for each center to look like, meaning which fields do you want to show up in whenever you go into a center and be able to manipulate. We talk about the workspace layouts and what the template looks like, all the different sections, and if you want to turn off a section, you can do that, and we actually will do that in the workshop and kind of begin to mold or configure in this environment so that whenever they come out of this workshop, it's the environment is maybe not fully configured the way the client wants, but it's pretty close. I mean, you're starting to get there. And then what we recommend is that the system is used in a pilot form, meaning maybe you use it for a project or use it for a proposal or something, because there might be other enhancements that are needed, and those enhancements can be decided and estimated to decide whether or not the client wants to spend money to do those enhancements. And then once all the initial enhancements are in there, then you kind of move into the final deploy. And so this is the recommended methodology. But as I mentioned, some people take their own path. They move from workshop to deploy. We have some people move from installation to deploy. So it really depends on the client and the level of use and sophistication they're going to be using the environment for. So that's a little bit about the deployment methodology. So getting back to our main picture here, we've talked now about the structure, which is ServicePoint 365, and as again you've seen, it's a pre-built house. It's got a number of rooms, or what you saw, centers, already ready to go, ready for content. And so now let's talk a little bit about how do we get content into the house, or how do we move the furniture into the house. And so this is this is going to entail some other solutions or strategies that can be anywhere from manual to automated. So when you look at migrating content into SharePoint Online, you can kind of put the migrations into two categories. One of them, is a simple migration strategy, and the other one is more complex. And for simple migrations, there are a couple things that you can do that don't require any type of tool that are just inherent in how ServicePoint and SharePoint works. So one is if I'm on a project, or if I'm on a client workspace, and let's say I've got a document somewhere on my server, my file server, or my local drive that I want to move into there, I can literally just drag and drop documents into the environment, and it will copy them in there, and then I can from that point on work with them, edit them in the ServicePoint365 or SharePoint environment. So the one manual migration approach is just literally drag and drop files, and that works quite well. Not all companies want to move everything they've got into the new environment, so some of them leave them where they are historically, and they're going to basically be any new stuff is going to be put in this environment. But that's really the customer's choice how they approach that. You can also use things like there's sync engines that come with Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive environment. You can use that as another way to where I could go into a client's workspace, and I could start syncing their library, and then I can, which means I now have a folder on my local device for that library, and then I can just drag and drop documents into that folder, and it will automatically synchronize them back up into the cloud. So that's again more of the manual approach, but it works very well in some cases where you're just looking at getting the documents in someplace. So you could take copy and paste, for instance, whole server folders or subfolders, paste it somewhere, and let it just go ahead and sync in the background up into SharePoint. Also, some of the master files or master records. So, for instance, if you were in Client Center and you had a list of all your clients in Client Center, you can put that list into kind of a grid mode, and then if you had all your clients listed maybe in an Excel sheet, you could go and copy multiple rows from Excel and just paste it into the Client Center, and very, very quickly have all of those client records and the associated information uploaded, just doing simple copy and paste between Excel as an example. Now, for more complex migrations, which this is where you just got too many documents out there to ever be able to have somebody go in and drag and drop and do the other things. There are some great tools out there, and the tools that we really recommend and have great success with are some of the tools from AvePoint. So there's an AvePoint migrator, which will allow you to really migrate content from virtually any platform. It could be existing SharePoint, it could be FileShare, it could be even things like Lotus Notes and other platforms like that. So it's kind of the full-on, more robust migrator. And then there's also from AvePoint another one called AP Elements, which is really for more streamlined migrations. So this will allow you to automatically migrate from either SharePoint, existing SharePoint on-prem environments, or from file servers. And we'll take a quick look at the AP Elements screens to give you a quick example of how that looks. So here we go. This is one of the things that within the migration tool is you're able to do a pre-migration report. So this will scan the environment, whether it's SharePoint or FileShare or whatever, and return back to you and show you a bunch of statistics, information about the type of content that you have, and so forth, and then you can make some decisions on this as to, do you bring everything over or not? Because migrations, obviously, it's a great opportunity to maybe clean house a little bit. So you may not want to go bring everything over, And so this will expose and analyze what you have, so you can make decisions on, do you want to bring everything over or not. And then when you actually get, if you look on the menu side, so I'm on the left side of the menu here, I've got the migration, pre-migration reporting area. Then if I go into the aspects where I'm actually going to begin my migration, this is an example to where I've got my source over on this side, I've got my destination over here. And so the source can be, again, I think any version of SharePoint on-prem or online that you might have your content in today, and then or file servers. So if you have it sitting on a file server, and then obviously the right is the destination is SharePoint Online. And so you can do a mapping of saying, I want these documents to go, over into this site collection in SharePoint Online, and it will take care of creating, or I can, if the site or site collection doesn't exist, it will create it for you. So a lot of automation with this. Also, this will, if you have metadata, so maybe you're using existing SharePoint environment, and you've got metadata associated with documents, you want to maintain the integrity of that metadata, this gives the ability to bring all of that stuff over and be with the documents in the new environment. And then when the migrations are running, gives you very good exposure to what's been migrated, statistics, see how the jobs are running. If there's any issues, expose any issues or alerts so that you can go back and resolve those and maybe rerun just that one particular area. So the tool is easy to use. It's set up for that purpose of helping you grab existing content from different sources and moving it to more in large batch or volume mode versus some of the manual modes that we mentioned as far as copy paste or drag and drop. So that's a little bit on the migration solutions, and there's a number of different solutions that are out there. We just covered the ones from AvePoint just because we have a very strong success record with them. We've seen its capability and would highly recommend. But again, there's other tools out there. Now let's go over to the bottom right part of this grid, which is protecting your all the stuff that's in your house, or in our scenario, all the stuff that's in SharePoint. So Microsoft has your content stored in their data centers, and that's where SharePoint Online is running. And there is some ability to recover that's inherent with Microsoft. I mean, there's things like recycle bins. So if you were to go in and delete something, it would go into a recycle bin in SharePoint. But that recycle bin is automatically purged by Microsoft periodically, and I don't know what the current days are. It's maybe every 30 days or 45 days. So it's really not intended to be a granular backup and restore strategy. Microsoft does have your back in the event that your primary data center gets knocked out. They've got your data mirrored in a secondary data center, so they can reestablish service if your primary data center gets blown away and get you back up and running. So they're in the business of catastrophic failure and be able to recover from catastrophic failure. They're not really in the business of an individual document got deleted either by accident or maybe an employee was leaving and wanted to clean out all their documents or maybe all their email on the way out the door. And so they're not really in the business of recovering that. And sometimes you may not know that for a period of time. And so that's really where this other solution comes into play, is it does granular backup and granular restore for all the elements within Office 365. And so give you a couple of examples of what this looks like. So this is cloud backup and management from AvePoint. Here we are on the main screen. It's showing me that we're backing up, Exchange Online, we're backing up SharePoint, we're backing up OneDrive, we're backing up groups. We'll also do Microsoft Project. This is kind of the main screen that gives you a high-level status of where things are, that backups are occurring. And what happens is once you configure the environment, and there's nothing that you install locally. It's a SaaS solution, so you simply point it at your Office 365 tenancy with the correct credentials, and it will then begin backing up. And the first time it backs up, it does a full backup, and then from that point on, it does an incremental backup 4 times a day. So 4 times a day, it's going to take a snapshot or incremental backup of your data. And then you can choose also where you want that data to be stored. You can they do provide some storage with the app, or you can configure your own things like Azure Blob Storage or Amazon, or if you have your own network, you can do an FTP or SFTP location and back it up to your own network. So and robust reporting on if there's any exceptions. Where those exceptions occurred, it will automatically alert you with emails. So if you can see down the side here, there's some other options such as alert settings and all that you can get into those menus and be able to configure that so that you're automatically tickled if there's something that needs your attention. Now, if you need to, really the value of a backup solution though is how easy is it to restore, because it's really all about the restoration of it, not just the backing up. And so very easy to go in and initiate a restore. So let's say here I am on the restore menu. Maybe I've got, I'm going to do a SharePoint example where I need to restore something from SharePoint. All I do is click on that tile. And I can start with a calendar view of all my backups. So this shows me all the different backups that have occurred, and it will show me all the backups, and then I can select a particular backup, say, hey, I want to restore from the backup that was done at 11 o'clock last night. So I just select that as being the backup that I want to restore from, and then it steps me through the process where I can say, okay, what do you want to restore? And so I can restore at any level. I could restore at a site collection level. This is again a SharePoint example. So I could restore an entire site collection. I could restore an individual site, subsite, folder, or document library or list, individual folder, or just a document. So that's what you're looking at here. I'm within this particular site, and looking at a document library that has a number of documents in it, and maybe all I really need is just this one document. And so that's what we mean by granular, where you can go in and you could restore at any level all the way down to the individual document. If it's email you're talking about, you could do the same thing, where I could restore at a mailbox level or an email level. So again, this is something that highly recommended as a way of kind of supplementing what you get from Microsoft. And there's also some other management tools that you get with the application, which allows you to do some other really cool things, such as restructuring content, being able to set permissions in SharePoint, giving you some alternative ways of doing that outside of what Microsoft does, which can be a little bit clunky. So let's talk a little bit about references and examples. We have customers, if you look at this complete solution, which is ServicePoint 365 and AppPoint, that fall in a variety of industries. Really, since you can rename, repurpose centers within SharePoint, within ServicePoint, it gives you the ability to really mold it to a variety of industries. Here's an example of some of the ones that we see a lot of success in currently, and really the commonality is that they've got information related to either internal or clients or projects that they're wanting to use SharePoint to be able to manage. One example customer is client Albion Scotia is the name of this client. They're a general contractor, so they're in the construction industry. They're running Office 365, running ServicePoint 365, and also the AppPoint backup. And they're using to manage all of their content related to their construction projects. So it's the size customers can vary, anywhere from a couple employees to several hundred employees that this full solution comes into play. So kind of wrapping up, we're 1 minute left here. Really kind of a summary is, what does the solution do for you? Quick to implement, do all this with limited SharePoint skills, really helping drive deeper consumption or adoption within your client base for SharePoint, and doing that in a fashion that requires very little SharePoint skills. Very easy to consume. You can purchase it through really Synnex and Tech Data. Both have cloud marketplaces. If you're a reseller on this call, if you're associated with Synnex or Tech Data, you can purchase this entire, the ServicePoint365 and also the tools from AvePoint is available through their CSP marketplace. So you can find them out there at their SKUs. Their prices will be available for you to review there. So very easy to purchase, get up and running. And so that's kind of comes to the end of our performance here today, so to speak. Here's my contact information. I invite you, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question during the session, feel free to send me an email directly or give me a call, and we'll make sure that your questions are answered. And I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to join in today. Hopefully there were some things here that you saw that might help you, either yourself or some of your clients, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you. So that's all for now. Thank you.